The Balance of Power and Rare Earths. America and China's Struggle for Hegemony by Brandon Lee Robinson. Introduction. All too often, we tend to assume that power is the same as overwhelming force. Historically, though, that's not the case. While military force can be essential to maintaining institutions of power, often it is their initial control of a resource that allows empires to build their military in the first place. The Spanish had gold, the British had spices, and since America's ascendancy after World War II, we've had oil. This control over oil has allowed the United States to impose its currency and therefore its control over the world economy. Yet as time has continued on, new technologies have become crucial. Rather than being dependent on oil, these technologies are dependent on rare earth elements, which are primarily controlled by China. Although America is still the dominant power, this rapid advance in technology has placed tension on the existing relationship between these two nations. To fully understand the struggle around rare earths, it's important to know some basic things about them. The first thing that most people are unaware of is that rare earths aren't actually rare. They're actually quite common in the Earth's core, similar to like iron or copper. The only difference is that because of their unique bonding properties, it's difficult to separate them away from other elements. So in order to really get a bountiful harvest of rare earths, you need to find an adequately high concentration of them, which can be difficult to find naturally. There are 19 different rare earth elements, but we typically divide them up into two separate groups. The first group consists of light rare earth elements, and they consist of lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium, neodymium, promethium, samarium, and europium. These are usually brought up most often when referring to consumer electronics such as your phone. But at the same time, they can be found almost anywhere in something as simple as the flint in your lighter. Then there are heavy rare earth elements. These are more highly valued for two reasons. The first is simply because they are found in smaller concentrations in most deposits. The other is because of their unique potential to form stronger and more durable bonds with other elements. This makes them extremely useful for military or industrial applications. Heavy rare earths include gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, holmium, erbium, thulium, ytterbium, lutetium, and yttrium. While light and heavy rare earth elements are found in different concentrations depending on how the deposit was formed, it's possible to find any rare earth element in any deposit. The most common source of light rare earths are simply referred to as metal vein deposits, and usually consist of either basanite or monazite. These deposits are formed by subterranean, manganese-rich magmas cycling between periods of extreme heat followed by periods of slow cooling. These conditions are very particular and are nearly the same as thorium and uranium. This means that extraction and refinement can result in severe health issues for those laborers involved, as well as extensive long-term environmental damage due to radiation. The other kind of rare earth deposit is referred to as an ionic adsorption clay deposit. Adsorption is different from absorption in that electron bonding only occurs on a surface level, as compared to being fully immersed into the molecular structure. Ionic adsorption clay deposits occur when eroded material from a metal vein deposit passes over clay. Heavy rare earths, with their strong potential for binding with foreign elements, stick to the clay more easily. Due to these factors, ionic adsorption clay deposits are much harder to come across and have much higher concentrations of heavy rare earths, making them more valuable. Also, due to how they are formed, there is no risk of radiation. However, the process of separating these rare earths from the clay requires ammonium sulfate. If consumed by people, ammonium sulfate can result in chemical burns and organ failure. In the environment, it can be used as a fertilizer for vegetation, but can cause algal blooms resulting in dead zones in water, which can be devastating for ecosystems. 1. History. Although people have been aware of and using rare earths since the 19th century, they first started becoming relevant in World War II. At the time, there were no dedicated domestic sources in the US, with the small amounts needed being imported first from Brazil, then India as the war advanced. This became a higher priority when the US began researching the atomic bomb, as uranium and thorium were actually still classified as rare earths besides being found alongside them. It wasn't until 1949 that the US had found its own domestic source of uranium and rare earths located at Mountain Pass Mine in Southern California. Originally surveyed as being a gold mine, the discovery of uranium made it a resource of national importance. The full realization of the potential behind rare earths was still decades away, but Mountain Pass found itself as the world's top producer at the time and would maintain a significant lead for the greater part of the remaining century. In comparison, China started at a significant disadvantage in regards to rare earths. Lacking a national geological society, China had found itself largely dependent on Western powers in regards to surveying its own resources in the first half of the 20th century. In 1927, a Chinese geologist by the name of Ding Dao Heng, while working with an international survey team, first identified the Mongolian mountain known as Bayan Obo as being a deposit of national interest. Although Mongolians consider the site as being a sacred mountain, it was immediately noted as being rich in both iron and rare earths, both of which could help the country industrialize. As war broke out with both the Japanese and the Communists, exploiting the deposit took a backseat to defending the region. During these conflicts, native Mongolians chose to fight against the nationalists, first with the Japanese, then later the Communists. Their goal was independence, but the end of the war instead led to the division of Mongolia. After the defeat of the Kuomintang in 1949, the Communists sought to cement their relationship with the USSR. The northwest half of Mongolia was granted sovereignty, both to serve as a fulfilled commitment for Mongolian assistance during the war and to create a small buffer state between China and the USSR. The southeastern half of Mongolia, which included Bayan Obo, was made into an autonomous region. This designation made it easier for China to develop the region for mining and industrial development. Resources gained from Bayan Obo supported both China and the USSR at a time when both felt threatened by the United States' newly developed atomic arsenal. A significant percentage of Bayan Obo's uranium was actually utilized in the USSR's own nuclear tests in Kazakhstan. In return, the USSR helped Chinese engineers and scientists in gaining more expertise. This cooperation didn't last long, however, due to geopolitical differences that grew between the two communist countries. In 1972, Nixon reopened diplomatic relations with China as a means of countering Soviet power. In 1979, Deng Xiaoping began actively opening up China from the inside, allowing foreign capital access to its pool of labor. This coincided with Reagan and Thatcher's policies of global neoliberalism. In 1985, both investors and the U.S. government acknowledged environmental and economic issues with Mountain Pass. China became a clear alternative. By 1995, Mountain Pass Mine had fully given up its dominance in producing rare earths to Bayan Obo. By 2002, the mine was closed. In 2009, a diplomatic incident occurs in the disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. A Chinese fisherman rams his boat into ships belonging to Japanese Coast Guard. Although it's disputed as to if and how the Chinese national government was involved, shipments of rare earths never made it to Japan. This was the first diplomatic incident regarding rare earths in 60 years and caused panic throughout the world. In 2012, China enacted export tariffs and quotas with the claimed intention of slowing production and protecting their own environment. The US, Japan, and European Union filed a suit against them in the World Trade Organization, arguing that China has too much direct control over these resources, and such measures are being performed solely to build up their own domestic manufacturing. In 2014, China loses the suit and files an appeal. The appeal is denied, and China releases its trade controls. 2. Strategy and means. Due to relaxed environmental regulations, China is able to more quickly begin extraction and refining processes without needing to pay nearly as much for cleanup. This makes their prices extra competitive. The Chinese government holds majority of the shares in most rare earth mining companies. This means that they can direct these mines to align with national strategic interests and prevent foreign investment into Chinese resources. The government will also grant substantial subsidies to these companies, meaning they are both protected and additionally more competitive at the state's expense. This is important in a market where profit margins are often razor thin. China's near-total monopoly grants them power over the market as a whole. Between its tremendous production capacity, large stockpiles, and government backing, China can go as far as to resource dump as a means of eliminating smaller competitors. This means that they release so many rare earths onto the market at once that other companies can no longer remain competitive and make a profit. In recent years, China has also begun importing rare earths from abroad. Alongside export controls, this means that prices on the international market continue going up, while China maintains easier access without even needing to boost production. China is also interested in investing in foreign deposits, most notably through the company Shenghe Resources. In smaller developing countries, these investments might involve developmental infrastructure or technology sharing. In Western countries that are outright hostile to Chinese funds, these investments might run through a proxy corporation from a neighboring country. Besides producing significant quantities of rare earths, China also has the most advanced techniques involved in refinement. This is to such an extent that rare earths refined outside of China may be completely unusable for certain advanced technologies. A difference of purity in refined rare earth metals of less than a hundredth of a single percentage point may be the difference between a usable product and wasted material. This is especially true of heavy rare earths, 99% of which comes from China to begin with. Due to this refinement expertise, even foreign mining companies who are otherwise unwilling to deal with China may have no choice but to send their materials to them. This is another point of control serving as a bottleneck. However, refinement of rare earths only boosts their value by about 23%, which in most cases means that no profit is being made in the absence of state subsidies. While production and refinement are mostly unprofitable without state intervention, China is able to make its money back by providing an environment where these otherwise hard-to-obtain resources are plentiful. Domestic Chinese products are inherently cheaper and more competitive, yet are still able to make a considerable profit. This environment is also appealing to foreign companies, who then bring their own capital and innovative technologies into the country as well as hire Chinese workers. Part 3. Modern Consequences. Trump's second administration so far has primarily consisted of aggressive trade legislation and aggressive military intervention. His global tariffs frustrated U.S. allies and rivals alike, and China was no exception. In April of 2025, China matched his threat of tariffs blow for blow. In October, he attempted to further escalate trade tensions, at which point China introduced export restrictions on several kinds of crucial rare earths. This threatened domestic U.S. tech companies. In November, Trump and Xi met in person, and afterwards announced a truce until 2027. In the dead of night on January 3, 2026, Trump launched a raid on the capital of Venezuela after months of naval blockades. Nicolas Maduro was abducted along with his wife, and his remaining administration fell under the control of Delcy Rodriguez, who has since been compliant with U.S. demands. Venezuela is rich in natural resources, ranging from hard crude to rare earths. However, the hard crude requires significant infrastructure to refine, and even afterwards it can be difficult to profit from. Meanwhile, the largest rare earth deposit, Cerro Impacto, is far from any existing roads and has been primarily surveyed by drones so far. At best, it would serve as a possible project in the distant future. More likely than not, Venezuela served more as a means for Trump to display his ability to project power and his dedication to his so-called Dadro Doctrine. Venezuela has received support and loans from China in exchange for access to crude, and now Trump can take a cut. This can also be seen as a stepping stone for aggression directed towards Cuba, who is now also blockaded. Additionally, Trump has shown extra hostility through his tariffs towards Brazil due to Lula's government imprisoning Bolsonaro after he attempted to copycat Trump's January 6 coup. Brazil has also increasingly been cooperative towards China, and has its own considerable rare earth deposits just southwest of the Venezuelan border. This is also close to a railway being built as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. In comparison to Venezuela, Greenland is clearly more directly involved in the rare earth struggle. Although the U.S. is already developing the Panbreeze rare earth deposit, Greenland is also home to the Kvanefjeld mine. Kvanefjeld is thought to be the 8th largest uranium mine in the world, and the 3rd largest metal vein rare earth deposit, ranking below only Bayan Obo itself and Australia's Mount Weld deposit. Kvanefjeld was originally set to be developed by Greenland Minerals, an Australian company with Shenghe Resources as an investor. Local elections led to the Kainfeld mine being ruled against due to possible environmental damage. As a means of coercion, Greenland Minerals brought a suit against the territory demanding $11 billion, about 10 times the size of their GDP. Danish courts ruled that the case sat within Greenland's jurisdiction in 2025, essentially placing the project in limbo. By threatening to take Greenland as a U.S. territory through force, Trump could likely overrule both the environmental legislation and Greenland Minerals' direct involvement in the project. Trump doesn't seem to understand diplomacy or soft power, and in his attempts to show dominance is quickly isolating the United States from the international order we formed to cement our hegemony. Besides actively pursuing rare earths, he also seems to be outright against some of their most important uses, such as renewable energy, meaning that he is likely to squander any access to these resources that he manages to achieve. On top of everything, much of his actions on the global stage seem to be knee-jerk reactions to perceived provocations by China, meaning that if this is their intention, he is easily manipulated. Clearly, I don't see his decisions as sustainable in the long run. Realizing at least some of the full potential of rare earths decades before the rest of the world, China has worked long and hard in making their control of rare earths as complete as it is. While Trump seems to hate the idea of compromise, it's becoming increasingly clear that China would greatly prefer that to outright conflict, only using its economic power as a last means.